Hi, welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Today I want to teach you something that I've been using for the last 6 years and was in fact my first ever tutorial. Now it was a pictorial tutorial. Is that a thing? A pictorial tutorial? I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, I have adapted this over the last few years to make it super easy and accessible for anyone, even those who are completely new to wirework jewellery making. So there are 3 gauges of wire which we're going to utilise today, which are 1mm gauge, 0.8mm gauge and 0.4mm gauge. I'm also going to be using 14 8mm beads. I've chosen to use 8mm round Swarovski pearls. So obviously you can size this down or up. A couple of tools that we're going to be using are my standard flush cutters, my bent chain nose pliers, any flat facing pliers with a relatively fine tip will do, and I'm going to be using my bead reamer to create some nice shapes in the wire, which I will show you how to do as we go through. So if you join me down at the board, I'll just run you through those materials. So I have got around about 1.2 metres, 120 centimetres or approximately 4 feet of 1mm gauge wire, and this is plenty to make really quite a substantial size bangle. So over the years I have referred to this as my eyelid bangle, and you can see it's got swooshes that pass over the globe of the bead. It's kind of reminiscent of a semi-closed eyelid, hence the name eyelid bangle. It is a technique which is suitable for absolutely everyone, and I hope you enjoy making it with me. I also have a good at least a metre, probably a little bit more. Let's go for 1.2 metres, so again 4 feet of 0.8mm gauge, plus I have pre-stranded my 8mm round beads onto some 0.4mm gauge wire. Today I'm going to be working with raw copper wire, as is my wire of the year. I really enjoy working with it. It's got a lovely soft and smooth texture, and you can kind of change how it looks if you wish a little bit later on. So the first thing that we're going to do is to create a little bit of a loop in the centre point of our 1mm gauge wire. So this is our heaviest gauge wire for today, and this is going to be what we use to create the framework of the piece. So finding that centrepiece is a bit of a trick. Just got to find it. It doesn't matter if it's not exact, but just approximately. I've had my bead reamer for a good 10 years now, and I always store it in its original tube, which means that it is in really good condition. So I found my approximate halfway point, and I'm going to start off with some round nose pliers, just creating a little bit of a loop, like so, all the way down to the base of those pliers, cross those over. So I'm creating myself a nice round shape there. Before switching to my flat facing pliers, these are my bent chain nose, I'm going to grip that shape and I'm just going to twist these 2 pieces. Now they might clong into the microphone. If they do, very sorry for the noise. So that's 1 twist and then a 2nd twist, like so. I'm just going to make sure that those are going off in approximately opposite directions. Now we have found our halfway point. What makes your life easier is if we warm through those strands of wire just between thumb and forefinger, and we can create tiny little coils of wire on either end of that central piece. So again, I'm just warming that wire through between thumb and forefinger, and just turning that into its own little loop. Now these will straighten out and become part of the design as we move through, but it just makes it slightly easier. We've made a little heart shape there. So I'm using a bead reamer. You could use a pen, you could indeed use a bail making plier if you have one, but for me freehand is the best way to go. So I'm just going to make these loops as close as possible and show you the basic technique for creating the form. So I'm going to use this area of my reamer, which is just slightly larger than the beads I want to sit inside. It's about 10mm. I'm going to take the right hand side of the wire and draw it over the top of the other wire. The left hand side comes down underneath, and if I turn that sideways on, you'll see that we've made that first form, that first shape. Now what we want to do is to twist the wire. You can see the wire which is now underneath is going over the top, so I want to kind of grip both of those 2 wires and twist as if you're turning a key in a lock. So that's 1 twist Let the light show you there. And then again, a second twist. And in doing so, we've created our first shape, and that's a nice hard form now. So you will be able to just move that slightly if you wish to. But you've created a lovely hard form, and we're going to repeat that until we have enough of those little loops, or forms if you prefer, circles or ovals, to create the length of bangle that you desire. So I've actually accidentally taken those the wrong way round. So I'm going to take my lower wire over the top, my upper wire down underneath. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing again and just twist once to create the first half and twice to create that second half. Can be a little bit skin removing on your finger and thumb tips, but it is all worth it in the end, I promise. So again, we're just going to cross those over. What is now the top wire is going to come down underneath, and the lower wire is going up and over the top. And if you continue to remember, your upper wire is going down, and you're going to twist in a clockwise fashion once and then twice. You'll find that you can get into a rhythm and that it becomes slightly faster. Obviously, if you're doing it to camera, it's quite tricky because you want to hold it in a particular format. So we're going to repeat. My lower wire comes up and over the top, the upper wire goes down and underneath. Try to get those to sit opposite your entry point to that form. So if I drop that out the way, if you can get that opposed, pop your form back in, and it pays to have something that is really very firm to undertake this section. So again, we're going to twist as if we're turning a key. That's 1 and that's 2. And you would just continue until you get to the far end. Now the piece that I have made today took 14 beads and around about a 10mm aperture for an 8mm bead. Now it would be very boring of me to show you that all the way along, so I'm going to show you the 3 techniques involved. And I'm also going to truncate this end now to show you as if you had done enough of these forms to create a complete bangle. So imagine, if you will, that you wanted to create 7 inches all the way around, which is a fair size for a bangle, I imagine. You would ensure that you had 7 inches end to end. So I'm just going to trim away with my flush cutters, and one of these I'm going to cut quite short, and I'm then going to use my round nose pliers just to put a tiny loop in, exactly as we did at the beginning of the demonstration. So the loop comes all the way around. I'm going to leave that long tail for a moment, hold that in position, take the tail that we've just cut, and make sure that we wrap that so that the loop is secure. So I'm going to go for 3 wraps, I think, before I give that a squeeze. Truncate the wire, and then make sure that any sharp ends are tucked away out of vision and also out of anywhere that they can harm you. So if you imagine, we've got a full 7 inches or whatever your desired length of bangle is, and that's all sitting nice and neatly. Now what I'm going to do is just leave a slightly more elongated tail. So take my flush cutters and leave a bit of a spare. I'll show you very briefly what I've done on this unit here, or this piece rather, is I've just popped a pearl in an elevated position. Again, these are Swarovski 8mm Ivory Pearls. And then I've just coiled around that. Now this sits very, very proud, but it does hide the tying together. You could take that pearl away. I will show you exactly what your alternative could be. Take the pearl out of the position, trim that to just a little bit shorter, and then you could pop a coil on the end which would sit much flatter. So if you wish to, you can refer back to this at the end. All I'm doing is creating a coil and chasing that all the way back down to cover up the bit where we've tied everything together, which we will come to in time. But I wanted to show you the 2 alternatives, first with the elevated pearl, and secondly, just as a closed coil, which you can see sits much more closely to the bangle itself. So I'm going to pop that one out of the way. So the next thing that we're going to do is add on the beads. Now, what I've done to make my life slightly easier is pre-strung my beads onto a length of 0.4mm gauge copper wire. You can leave that on the reel or in the bag or however you desire, but I'm going to just demonstrate with a small section, so you would need to allow yourself much more wire than I have in my little bag here. So if you pop down to the board with me, what I'm going to do, as I say, I've got my pre-stranded beads, and I'm going to start by wrapping the cut end of my 0.4mm gauge wire around the section that we've created here. We've got some loops or some coils going around here, so I'm just going to wrap the tail of that wire. I've got about 2 inches of spare wire into the grooves created by that coiling. And then I'm going to take the last little bit and just wrap it inside the loop that we've created on the end. And the loop will be used later to seal the bangle so that it all fits into one beautiful endless form. So I'm going to go once and twice and then a third time, just to make sure that we've got a really good strong grip on the end there. Scooch the wire, the fine wire, so it sits as close as possible. What I'm going to do is allow a little bit of residue on the end, about 3 or 4 millimeters, and I'm going to chase that tail so that it sits inside the loop. So as far as possible, we're keeping that away from any danger. So that's sitting nice and neatly and tidy. Give that a bit of a squeeze. I'm going to flip the design over. Now my finer gauge wire is sitting over the top of the upper left side of my first form that I've created. So I'm going to drop in one of my beads. As I say, the beads are around about 8mm and the form is around about 10mm. You can have them the same size and it will sit beautifully. So from over the top left to bottom right, I'm going to hold the bead in position, and then I'm going to wrap once and twice all the way around until I am starting again top left on that form. So drop another bead in. It's like it's on a little zip wire, having lots of fun there. If you have a great big long length, as you will do if you're making a large sized bangle, an alternative to wrapping the wire once, twice and around again, drop the bead in, you can actually twist the form itself. So from top left to bottom right, I'm going to twist the form and hold my fine gauge wire still while I draw that all the way around until I end up in the same position. Now you'll need to check that you're in on the same side. So at the moment I'm looking underneath. So if I come back half a turn, I can see that I have my fine gauge wire top left. I'm going to bring that last bead into position, going across the bottom right. And I'm going to finish off by wrapping a couple of times around there, leaving myself 1.5 inches of free wire. And then I'm going to take the tail, post it inside the loop at the other end. And as I say, it would be very boring for you to watch me do that 14 times, but that's what I've used for my bangle. There are 14 beads and they're 8mm beads inside 10 or so millimeter apertures. So again, I'm wrapping a good 3 or 4 times, leaving myself a little tail of wire, which I'm then going to chase all the way around and have that sit as close as possible inside the design, like so. It's being a bit naughty, so I'm just going to use my fingernail to get that into position and then ensure that that's nice and smooth and flat. So you can see that we've created our main forms and we've now got our little beads sitting inside those forms. So I'm just going to leave that out of the way for a second. What I'm going to do is start at the opposite end with my 0.8mm gauge wire. Now I've cut myself 1.2 or so meters, around about 4 feet of 0.8mm gauge, because that's what I would use if I was making a full size bangle. So what we're going to start off by doing is winding that around the neck at one end of our bangle form. So if you pop back down to the board with me now, just to make my life easier, I'm going to start over here. Because I am right-handed, I'm going to support the framework in my non-dominant hand, and I'm going to just take a tail of my 0.8mm gauge and wrap that around the neck that we've created a good couple of times, just to get that until it sits nice and smooth. I just need to take that tail so that it sits up and out of the way. Give that a bit of a squeeze and a pinch to make sure that it has a good grip into the guts of the design. What I'm going to do now is flip the design over the top like so. And again, because I'm right-handed, I'm right dominant, I have my fine wire is starting top left over the face of the whole design. So we can see the fine wire is on this face. This is the top. If you look on the bottom, the beads are flush inside the base there, and they sit elevated on top of the design. So we're on the top of the design, coming from top left over the top of that bead, and again you do have the option of twisting the design in your hand once and twice until you're back on the same face. So from top left over the top of the bead, and what we're doing is we're just skirting over the top. We're not right up hard against the frame that we've created, we're elevated from that frame. If I show you from the side, you can see there's a good 2 millimeters between, and your alternative is to wrap your 0.8 millimeter gauge around the necks we've created between each of those forms. So I'm just going to repeat that another 2 times, and I'll show you the different ways in which you can do it. So we can twist the framework or we can twist the wire. Now if you need to, you can just push that slightly back until they sit relatively reasonably closely in position. When I get to the far end, what I want to do is keep that to a single wire wrap all the way. It's come down to the bottom right around the back of the neck we've created, and then I'm going to flip over, smooth that 0.8 millimeter gauge wire over the top, and again we're a good 2 to 3 millimeters away from the frame we've created. Push that down if you need to, and I'm going to repeat exactly the same, but I'm going to do it at the speed I would normally work at. It's exactly the same technique. You're wrapping around 1 and 2 and again until we get back to the far end, and you've created an eyelid underneath and an eyelid over the top. Reasonably fluid wire that you can just move around until it sits how you desire. So to make sure that our end section is nice and secure, I'm going to wrap as closely as I can. Some nice tight coil work till I get to the end. So I'm going to trim away, but you wouldn't have much excess because you're probably going to be working on a 7-inch or so bangle form. As I say, I used 14 8mm beads and a 10mm aperture to create the form. So that would be a great big long swathe of a bangleness. And what you would need to do is form that carefully around an object that you know your hand would fit inside. So I actually freehand formed this because there is strength where you build up layers of wire, but there's also malleability. So if I just deform this slightly, I've squashed it, it's been through a horrible post dilemma, and then you can just turn that so that it fits exactly how you would like that to fit. So you can freehand form that to the shape of the wrist if you desire, if that's what you're looking to achieve. So if you pop back down to the board, I'm going to show you, obviously this is not a bangle size, this isn't even really a very comfortable ring design, but you can see how easy they are to form around. Once you've got your 2 loops at the end, they will be slightly easier to handle than this. That tail of wire that we left is going to be used just to bring those 2 pieces together. Now for me, you can, if you wanted to, have that as an open bracelet, make it much shorter, and then put some linking to this. You could use a J-hook, you could use an S-clasp or anything like that, but I want to make a bangle today, so I'm going to sit one of those loops over the top of the other one, and then I'm going to use my residue of wire just to sew those together. So I'm posting up in between both of those end loops. Because we're working with 1mm gauge wire that's seen some action, it's not weak and weedy, you do need to give it some effort. So I've gone through once on one side, I'm going to post the wire up the centre. Again, you'll have a lot more room to work if you're making a full-size bangle. Pull the tail all the way through, and then I'm going to link around the other side of those 2 end loops that we created. So pushing the wire this time down inside those 2 holes. As long as you're going through both of them, it doesn't really matter if they're not 100% flush to one another. So I'm just going to pull that as tight as I can until they sit reasonably close. I know it's not pretty at the moment, but it is very, very secure. So what I would then do is pop in with my round nose pliers, which are currently being eaten by a reel of wire. I'm going to create one of those coils for the end. You could obviously make this a lot more tidy than I am currently doing so. There is a dedicated video to the kind creation of coils. This is not a kind creation, this is a hurried one just to show you the overall technique. So we're going to create a coil and bring that close down to the tying together mess that we've made, and then just sit that flush over the top. So you can see this made up in really not very many minutes whatsoever. I mean, you could actually wear that as a ring. It wouldn't be very comfortable, but there you go. This is what we're looking to create, which is a nice solid bangle. This one is a me size. I've chosen 8mm Swarovski pearls. They're really, really beautiful. They have great luster, and the tools that I've used are fairly standard. This is my bead reamer that I've had for a very long time. Very, very handy piece of kit, not just for reaming beads. I'm Gem Hawks. Thank you for continuing to support me and join me here on YouTube. I hope you're enjoying the tutorials. Any requests, please let me know. And I'll see you over on Facebook on a Monday live every other week, 8 PM British time. I hope you can join me very, very soon. Take care and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.